Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm just getting us set up here. My apologies for a little bit of a delay starting this video. We're going ahead and doing a live Q&A today. I'm also going to be talking a little bit about why I think historical fiction, and in particular World War II fiction, is having a moment right now and has seemed to be having a moment for quite a while. So we're going to look at why that trend is so popular in fiction and also do a little bit of Q&A as well as a book giveaway. So for the Q&A, if you go ahead and start dropping your comments into the comment bar, that will allow me to follow along, answer some questions. I'll be doing that throughout this live video. And I'm just going to go ahead and check, make sure that we're all set up. Make sure that everything looks okay, and I'll be able to get this really started in just a few moments. So if you guys want to go ahead and pop a comment into the video, let me know what you're currently reading. Always love to add to my TBR list. Always love to see what is coming up and what people are excited about. So hi, Susan from New Jersey. It's good to see you. I think I've seen you before on some of these videos, so I know we're going to get some repeat readers here, which is always really exciting. It means also we can do a little bit of following along, and hopefully some of you read some of the book recommendations that I did last time. So it'd be really exciting to hear what you guys think. So yeah, leave me a comment. Let me know what it is that you're reading right now, and then we'll go ahead and get this started. You can start dropping your questions in there as well, which is always a lot of fun for me. So I am going to go ahead and let's see, take a look here at my notes. I do have a few notes, not many, but a few just to keep me on track. I'm going to try something a little different this time. I'm going to keep this a little bit on the shorter side. I'm playing around with different formats, playing around with different lengths, just to see what you guys like, what people seem to respond to. So this might be a little bit shorter than my last video, but I think that should hopefully still keep you satisfied, and we'll still do the book giveaway and all those things that go along with it. So hi, Anne. Anne is currently reading The Daughters of Foxcote Manor by Eve Chase. I haven't read that one, but I always love a new title and a new recommendation. So I think that's a new one to me. I don't think I know about that book. So always excited to get some new book recommendations. So I wanted to talk about sort of the topic for this month, which is what is the appeal of historical fiction focused around World War II, and why does it seem like it's been such a hot trend for so long in the marketplace in publishing? So this is something that I was actually asked a few months ago, maybe back in June, while doing a Facebook Live event with Kristen Harmel, who is also a World War II author. Her books tend to focus on France, and big congratulations to her. She actually hit the New York Times bestseller list with her most recent book, which is The Book of Lost Names. That was really exciting. It's always really thrilling to see when people do really big, really exciting things like that. So we were talking about this, and it was a question that was thrown out during this discussion, and I thought it was really interesting. It does seem like there are a lot of books on the market right now that are all around World War II, and specifically about women's stories in World War II, which I think is a particularly fascinating area, and I can talk a little bit about why I'm particularly drawn to this area of history, and specifically looking at women and what their role was in World War II. So I think, on a really simple, straightforward level, World War II has a few things that hold a lot of interest, certainly for me as a reader, and I think for readers in general. One is that in some ways it's pretty straightforward. It's black and white. It's good and evil. You know what sides you're on when you're sort of looking at the story as a whole. So if you, for instance, are reading a book like mine, where you have the Whispers of War, where there are people who are living in the UK, who are fighting against Germany, which has invaded Poland. It's pretty clear and pretty straightforward that we're not going to be in favor of Hitler and of what is happening. But then there's nuance that can be built out throughout those stories. So there's the overall war, and how we kind of respond to that as a big macro big picture thing. And then there's the individual stories that are within that. And I think the war is really interesting because there are a lot of things that people can, a lot of ways that people can be very brave, a lot of ways that people can really betray people, a lot of ways that people's personalities come out, sometimes in not very happy circumstances. So I think, you have this larger sense of, you understand some of the framework of what these books are going to be giving you. Just like with the mystery, you understand that the framework is going to be about, the solving of a puzzle. A romance is going to have a romantic relationship at the heart of it. Again, framework really helps, I think, when you're a reader and you're looking for a certain type of book to satisfy a certain thing that you're looking for. So I think there's something about that in play. And then I think also it's just, you can tell these really interesting, sometimes very subtle stories, where there's incredibly, fraught decisions that people have to make. People are really pushed to extremes. So I think that has a lot to do with it. On the flip side, I think also that there is a real sense of comfort that can come from these books, where you see people doing extraordinary things. You see people kind of stepping outside of themselves. You see people really acting in an altruistic way. And I think it's particularly interesting, and this question originally came from a conversation that happened digitally because of the pandemic, and I absolutely in my own life saw a very small sliver of that. I'm not comparing the pandemic and what we went through here in London to what people went through in London in the war by any means. But I think it was interesting to see how communities pulled together. I know on my 2-block road, people were shopping for elderly, vulnerable people. People were, offering to check in on neighbors, picking people up and dropping them off from doctor's appointments. In a city like London, and where I've lived before in New York, where it can sometimes feel very anonymous, it is sometimes really comforting to see people really step up and see people become the best versions of themselves by reaching out to the community and helping each other, and really kind of having a bit of that spirit. So I think that's absolutely prevalent in World War II books. There's everything from the keep calm and carry on slogans, dig for victory, these things that people were being asked to do, things that were extraordinary, things that were outside of their normal everyday attitudes and behaviors, obviously everywhere from everything from enlisting and serving, all the way through to just, following rationing, to, checking on members of the community, to, clearing building rubble when air raids cleared and there had been bombing. I think you get a lot of people really stepping up and volunteering. And I do think there's a sense of comfort and a sense of community that comes from those books. And so in that way, ironically, despite the fact that these books are set during the middle of wartime, that can be really comforting, and that can feel really comforting to a lot of people. So I think there's that aspect. There's certainly nostalgia, and it's funny, the idea of being nostalgic for a time period that you didn't live through. I didn't live through World War II. I have very few family members who have strong memories of living through World War II, unfortunately, any longer. But I think that there is a bit of a sense of a communal nostalgia. It's a bit rose-tinted, but I think where it becomes more interesting is when you get into that subtlety of different stories that I mentioned before. But at the same time, it's sort of, World War II is far enough away that it does kind of get cloaked in a bit of that collective nostalgia that we sometimes talk about. So I think there's definitely that aspect too. There's a slight glamour to another time. There's a glamour to, dressing differently, wearing hair differently, having to do different things. The cars looked different, people's lives just looked different, and I think that in some ways can be really appealing. It was interesting. One of my friends was talking to me about, what do you think the most acceptable time period, most acceptable recent time period to write about would be? And I think it's actually changed during my major readership as an adult. It used to be that it was sort of through the end of the war was really where people were willing to I think for the most part, go ahead and sort of that was about as recent as people wanted to read about, and then it started to creep up into the 50s, and then now I think it's really starting to creep up into the 60s if you have a bit of that sort of Mad Men style glamour, the beautiful clothes, the sort of the glitz of New York or a swinging 60s London. I think we're really getting into that zone. And then there's some outliers like Daisy Jones and the Six is absolutely a historical novel told about a rock band in the 70s and sort of the coming together and the breaking apart of that band. But I do think that the 70s is still a little close for a lot of people and doesn't have quite that same nostalgia. But maybe you guys disagree with me. You can go ahead and tell me if you think that I'm off base there. But that was kind of my theory that we're about 60 years away is about our comfort zone right now for nostalgia, 50, 60 years. So let me know what you think. But then another, going back to World War II and why I think it's so popular right now and why, you see books like my books, you see, Kristen Harmel is writing about this area, Kristen Hanna, Fiona Davis has written stories that touch in World War II, Camille DeMaio. These are just friends of mine. Some of them, there are just so many authors who have so many wonderful books coming out. I think a lot of it is just there are so many stories to be told about the war. It's just an interesting time period. There was a lot going on. There were a lot of countries, a lot of different areas, and a lot of different types of people that were all involved in fighting this war. And I think we only started scratching the surface of telling those stories. I know, one of the things that's been really fascinating recently is a lot of the conversation about, what different soldiers and different people volunteering from around the British Empire and the former British Empire were doing. So talking about the role of people of color in the war, the role of people of color from Britain, from the United States, different things that people were dealing with during World War II, and kind of how that all fits together as a larger society. There's, I know for me personally, just researching, it's been fascinating learning about rationing, which is not something that ever happened in my lifetime, but has happened in my aunts and uncles' lifetime, especially after the war in Britain when austerity was still in place. The idea of walking down my London street and, we have new builds from, well, not new builds now, but we have new buildings that were built in the 60s and 70s, which I'm positive were bomb sites because you can actually see the mapping of bombs in London and across London that people have put together to see where those strikes actually hit. It's in some ways it's a bit of living history for me, but in some ways it's also things that I think you can just spend a whole lifetime learning about. And it's behind me right now, so I can't actually pick it out, but I have this huge book that's just in the 70s, a historian started collecting stories of people's memories from the war. Everything from sort of what it was like being a school child, what it was like being a housewife, being in service, being a member of one of the auxiliary services. They're just fascinating stories from all over the country, and sort of just the way that people lived, I think, is interesting. The clothing that people wore, the things that you had to do because of rationing, the things that you had to do because, your loved one may be in the military, and how would you get military mail to them? I think all of that, in some ways, it's those tiny details that are really fascinating. And I think books that are really effective pull people in with those details, but also teach them at the same time. So you're sort of constantly learning and constantly figuring out, little bits and pieces of history. And one of my favorite ways, outside of obviously any academic work I've done, one of my favorite ways to learn about history is just to read really well-researched historical novels. I think it's an absolute joy to have that sort of novel in front of you, because you can just kind of absorb what it is that the author's been telling you. And I think that those are some of the things that are, really driving this trend. And I almost laugh calling it a trend, because I don't think World War II is ever going to not be interesting to readers. I think it's maybe getting more interest than some areas at the moment. And I think absolutely there are ebbs and flows in publishing. And so, of course, the next question that people always ask is, when does the bottom fall out of the market? When does nobody want to read about World War II anymore? And the reality is there are always going to be people who want to read about World War II. Right now, there's a lot of books coming out on the market. There are a lot of people who are focusing on this particular area of literature. And I know some people have burned out. Some people have told me they don't want to read World War II anymore. And that's fine. Those books are not going away. These books, if you need to come back to it a little bit, these books will be there for you when you're ready. But I think a lot of what's driving that is that curiosity, is that sense of nostalgia, and is that sense of strangely comfort that can come from some of those books too. So I know that there's a lot of stuff going on in the comments here, so I want to take a look and see what you guys think about this as well. Oh my goodness, there are so many things. Okay, this is exciting. So we've got some good book recommendations. I have a couple of people recommending or saying they're reading The Lions of Fifth Avenue by Fiona Davis, and Fiona just hit the New York Times bestseller list with that book. I'm really, really excited, and she was picked to be a GMA book club pick as well. So I'm really thrilled about that. I love her books. She writes about New York. She writes about historic New York, all based around landmarks, and I think that's an absolutely genius thing to build your career around. So it's very exciting. Let me see. Okay. So Susan says, my mother-in-law was a survivor. Sadly, there are not too many survivors left, so the books are telling the history and the stories that are so important to know and remember. Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. I learned something new from every World War II book that I read. Very, very glad to hear that. Samantha says she completely agrees. I'm so nostalgic for the era, and I think I should have been alive then. I think you're not alone. I think a lot of people think, if you had to choose an era, maybe that would be one of the ones that they'd be interested in. Let's see. Anne says, it's some of these eras are a bit too soon to be considered historical fiction. So I think, that's kind of a bit of a constantly moving goalpost, and maybe when we have this conversation in 10 years, maybe we'll all have a bit of a different sense of the 70s and sort of what I think the edge of the historical fiction nostalgia market is, but we'll see. Amanda says, what I love most about historical fiction is learning the untold stories. I couldn't agree more. Most of what we learn about history is told from the perspective of victors, people who are white and male, and there's so much more to the story. So much more than what we thought, what we've been traditionally told. I love hearing the backstories about the little guy or woman in the background. They have important stories too. I completely agree, and it's one of the reasons that I write about women, actually. And this is a question I get a lot: is why do you focus on women's stories? Because I think in a lot of cases those are the stories that haven't been told yet, or the stories that have not gotten the attention that they deserve. And if I can do a little bit to kind of give people a nudge in the right direction of learning more about those women or learning more about other women in the war, I think that is absolutely the fight I'm happy to fight. So I think when it comes to historical fiction, to me, I think it's always more interesting to write about people that and stories that people aren't necessarily so familiar with. So you can hopefully bring somebody along with that story and encourage them throughout the rest of their reading, and encourage them to perhaps pick up another book. So I always, at the end of my books, I always recommend, or I always talk about the books that were important to me in terms of research, in hopes that if somebody is interested, they'll potentially pick that up. And I also have a bunch of things on my website. If you go in, I believe it's the extras or the bonus section, there's a tab for something called the Light Seekers, and that was a series of stories that I did around this book, which was about sort of women's extraordinary acts throughout the war. And it's everyone from sort of Churchill's wife, Clementine, all the way through to the Gunner Girls, who are the subject of this book, and some pretty extraordinary women who I didn't know a huge amount about before I started to go looking. We'd hear about spies, and that's absolutely incredibly important work that these women did, but there's a lot of other things that women were involved with when it came to the war. So my hope was to shed a bit of light, no pun intended, on these women's contributions and talk a bit about what it was that they were what they were able to do to help win the war. And I think that's a really important distinction. You know, women's contributions absolutely helped win the war. So yeah, I'm so glad. I'm so glad that that you guys find this to be interesting too. I'm just gonna really quickly, really quickly, do a shout out to my very good friend and very talented author, Alexis Ann, who says, "How much did you miss me? I'm happy to see you today, even if it's virtual. I feel the same way about you, Alexis." And I am also very happy because Alexis has got some good stuff that's just released, and also some good stuff that is coming out. If you are a romance reader, especially if you like your romance a bit steamy, she's an absolutely fantastic, really talented author. So I'm also very lucky to call her one of my very good friends. So I am very happy to see her. This is the joy of doing virtual events and things like this and regular monthly things. It's just fun. It's fun to check in with you guys. I feel like I'm starting to recognize some of the names and get to know, you know, some of your reading tastes a little bit, getting to know some of the books that you really enjoy, and hopefully able to give you a little bit more behind the scenes of maybe the publishing industry sometimes, and also the books that I've written as well. So I'm always happy to share. So keep dropping comments in. Keep you know, going through and doing some messages, because I am going to do a book giveaway. I think I've decided what the book is going to be, and I'll tell you why. My hardcover release from January is The Whispers of War, which, speaking about a book about stories that are not very well known. This came out of one of those stories. So this book is about a group of 3 friends, one of whom is a German expat. These girls all went to boarding school together. They all live in London. They all call London home, but one of them is German. And when the war breaks out, she is forced to register as an enemy alien, and she goes ahead and does all the things she's supposed to do. But as the war becomes more and more fraught, as public opinion starts to change about how people felt about, you know, German and Austrian and then later Italian immigrants living in the UK, there were calls for internment. And so the 3 friends have to make some really big, really scary decisions about what they're going to do and what they're willing to sacrifice in order to keep her out of internment and keep her safe during the war. So that's what this book is about, and I'm going to be giving this away because it's coming out in paperback. I still have quite a few hardcovers because as an author they send you a whole box of books. I think I've talked about this before, but you get a whole bunch of books, and they are sitting on my shelf, and I really, really want these books to find good homes. So this one is going to be going to one lucky reader who, all you have to do is go ahead and drop a comment into the comments, and then you'll be entered to win. I do a drawing, I'll get in contact with you, and then I'll go ahead and sign and ship you a book. So very, very supportive of the postal service here in the UK as well in the US. So I'm always happy to send books out. So this is going to be the giveaway for this month. Really excited about it. I also, just to give you a little nudge, if you haven't already, this is my new book that will be coming out in January. So we've got a paperback that's coming out in The Whispers of War. This is coming out in hardcover, although this is a soft cover because this is an advanced reader copy. So this is a book that almost nobody has in their hands right now. I'm going to be giving this away when I do my next newsletter giveaway. So if you want to sign up to my newsletter, you can go to my website, and on the right-hand side it says sign up for newsletter, and that will go ahead and get you entered for this book as well. So I am very, very excited. Well, it won't get you entered. It will get you onto the email that will get you the entry. That's the right thing. And you can go ahead and win this, which is an uncorrected proof. So this is literally the beginning of the process of people actually getting to read this and actually getting to go ahead and take a look at this book. So I'm really excited about this one. This is all about gardens. It's all about an entwined story with 3 different generations of women. Part of it is set in World War II, part of it's set in the Edwardian era, and part of it's set in present day. And I just had an absolute blast writing this book. I think you're really going to love it, especially if you want to have a bit of a warm, cozy feeling. So it's available for pre-order. You can also go ahead and sign up for my newsletter and look out for the chance to go ahead and go ahead and win a copy of this as well. So fingers crossed, good luck. But for today, it's going to be the Whispers of War. This is the one that you will be entered in. If you comment, you'll be entered to win. So just keeping that as an option. So let's see, where are we with questions? Does anybody have anything that we want to talk about? Let's find out. Some very, very nice people saying nice things about the Whispers of War. I'm so happy. So happy you guys enjoyed it. Mary Beth, my apologies if I have that wrong, asks if there's a way we can order autographed copies. I don't right now have a system set up to do autographed copies. However, you're not the first person to ask about that, so let me have a think about the best way that I can do that, and I will get back to you with more details. And I'll talk about it again, and we're going to be doing these Q&As every month, so there will be another chance. Again, you can also sign up for my newsletter if there are opportunities to do some autographed copies. I will go ahead and drop that into my newsletter. I've got to think about the best way to do that in terms of payment and in terms of shipping and making sure that I can actually get books out to you guys. So let me have a think, and I'll figure that out. Let's see. Samantha is saying she recently read Lady Clementine by Marie Benedict. I have seen that book everywhere. Haven't read it yet, but I've seen it everywhere. So yes, I think that might be another one to add to my TBR. Elizabeth says hello from Pittsburgh. Hello, thank you so much. I'm really excited that you guys are excited about The Last Garden in England. I hope that that's something that you guys really enjoy. Oh, Brooke. So Brooke is somebody who I've known for a very, very long time. It's good to see you on here. Brooke is saying, I know you have a passion for fashion. How does that impact the characters and eras that you write about? That's so funny that you asked that, because I am currently writing a book for 2022, which seems like a really long way away and is not in publishing terms. So it's my work in progress. And this book is going to be a book that is heavy on fashion, and there's good reason for it. The group of people and the reason that I'm writing this book, which I can't talk about yet, the reason that I'm writing this book does have fashion very much at the center of it, and so I'm having an absolutely fantastic time. Speaking of different time periods, writing about the fashions of the 1950s, and so lots of big skirts, lots of really belted waists, very hourglass figure. That was one of the things that really was important. But there's a lot of variation within fashion, right? There's personal taste that comes into play. There are different things that you could do. You can express your style, maybe not as widely as you can now, because clothing still would have been a bit more restricted in terms of what your options were. But I think it's really interesting to look at how different characters express themselves through different clothes. And I haven't done this a huge amount in my books, but I'm hoping to very, very soon in this book. Why do people choose certain colors? Why do people choose certain cuts and certain patterns? Do people feel awkward in their clothes? Does clothing kind of emphasize something about somebody? I know the one thing that I really have tried to emphasize with all three of my World War II books that are out or are coming out is the sense that clothing was something that you had to be mindful of because of clothing rationing that came in later in the war. And so how does that impact how somebody would treat their wardrobe? I'm a knitter myself, so I am really interested in the idea of women taking out sweaters, knitting them back up again, doing different things, trying to achieve some level of fashion or something that they to express themselves and to make themselves feel good when you didn't really have a huge amount of resources. So what do you do to actually do that and actually achieve that? I think it's really, really interesting. And I think, I have a wedding scene in a book coming up. And one of my favorite things is looking at wedding photos from World War II, because a lot of women got married in their service dress. a lot of women got married in, you know, whatever their best dress would have been, whether it was color, whether it was, you know, different cuts, different things, if it was borrowed from somebody, if they maybe, you know, scraped together clothing coupons to make up a dress. And often it would be not necessarily a white dress, because you would want that clothing coupon to last as long as possible. So you'd do something that'd be a bit more practical. So I love, absolutely love this subject, and love looking at clothes, love talking about clothes, love makeup and shoes and hair and all of that stuff. So yeah, I'm hoping that you'll see a bit more of that creep into certainly The Last Garden in England, and then my book for 2022, my secret project. So all right, let's see, how we doing here, guys? Oh, Mary Beth, I'm glad to hear that you're excited about the Edwardian era. I find it really, really interesting, and I think a lot of people were introduced to it relatively recently because of Downton Abbey. This is a little bit earlier. This is 1907 that I'm writing about, so I think it's a bit fun. It's going to be a lot of fun. Amanda's asking, how much do stories change between ARCs or advanced reader copies and the first editions? So for me, I've never had a book change dramatically. Once it gets to this form, which is the early reader copy form, and you can see because it's got that sticker right there, although it's not a sticker, it's just flushed the page. Once it gets to that form, we basically have gone through copy edits, we've gone through the major changes, and really this is what I end up going through in proofreading. So on this book, there were not a massive number of changes. You know, we're talking about commas, we're talking about occasionally a spare word that went missing, double checking names, things like that. So this is really, they say this is not, let's see, not for sale or quotation, because this isn't an official book yet. And if you were to use this in a review, you might misquote or change something. So they do ask you to look against the finished copies. But I think it's really interesting because, you know, technically you could have a change, but I'll tell you, there's a monetary penalty if you change too much. If I change too much of this, they have to do something called reflowing the pages. So they have to recopy edit everything, reproofread everything, and then they need to make sure that this still actually fits the spine, it fits, you know, everything that is going into the book. So major changes can cost quite a bit of money actually for the publisher, and so I would have to foot the bill. But by this point, this has been gone over by so many people. It's been gone over by me more times than I can tell you, and I'm probably not useful anymore because I've read the book too much. But that's when you really, you do the major changes earlier in the book. So that's the hope. So. Ooh, Gail's asking about signed book plates. Stay tuned, because I'm still working out what exactly is going to happen with that, but I think there's going to be some sort of, hopefully, pre-order situation where we can maybe do some signed book plates. I'm working out the details, so I don't want to promise anything yet, but I would love to do a signed book plate. I would love to, you know, give a bit of a reward if somebody goes ahead and pre-orders the book, because pre-orders are really helpful for authors. It's that thing that, just being quite frank, helps boost books into the bestseller list, because you have all the pre-order time, and then you have the initial week of sale, and then all those numbers go together and can be a really big help in boosting the book. So a lot of authors are kind of looking at creative ways to do things. I love the idea of a book plate, especially because, you know, a book plate in a hardcover just looks so good. It would look good, and I've got my paperback here for the Light Over London. It would look good in one of these too, but I really think the hardcover is really the way to go, and it's got, you know, it's got lovely end papers and all of that stuff. So book plates work really nicely for those types of things. So Caitlin, hi, it's good to see you too. Thank you so much. Yes, Janet, there will be a 2022 book, there will be a 2023 book. I will make sure that happens for you, don't worry. I did a little announcement that I had 2 more books coming in 2022 and 2023 on Instagram. So if you follow me on Instagram, you'll get a bit more detail there. And let's see. Samantha says, I thought The Whispers of War was so interesting because it brought a new perspective on the era. Thank you. The lead character being of German descent in England, I thought that was a whole new take on what's been written before. Thank you so much. Scott, who is a good, shall we say, a good friend to me, asks, how do I pitch a book idea to my publisher? It's an interesting process. So it starts with me thinking of an idea, figuring out what it is that I want to write about. And then basically what happens from there is I call my agent and we have a conversation about whether she thinks it's a viable idea or not, because I'll be completely honest, I'm a working author. I would really like to get paid for my work, and it's important that I do get paid for my work, and I think it's important that all creatives get paid for their work. And so we talk about whether that's actually going to work as an idea or not. We'll sometimes talk about what my brand is, what she thinks that you guys might like, because she's got a really good sense of what's going on in the market and how that works. And then once we've settled on, okay, this is actually the idea I'm going to develop, I'll go back and write a sort of 3 to 7 page synopsis. That's what it's been so far. Sometimes with a cast of characters and kind of an overall pitch, and then I'll go through and I'll write, this is what I actually think is going to happen in this book. And of course, it's books change as you write them. But so what I'll do is I'll write down, start, middle, and ending. There's no mystery. This is not like the back of the book where you're kind of, you get a blurb that kind of ends in a question or a ... This is actually what you think is going to happen in the book. And then we'll go back and forth, make sure that that pitch looks good. And then she will approach, if I'm under contract, she'll approach my editor and say, hey, this is what Julia wants to write about. What do you think about that? And the editor will either say, yep, love it, or yeah, this is not quite what we're looking for. And we'll do some back and forth in both instances. Often, if an editor says, yeah, I really like that book, but I've got questions about X, Y, or Z thing, we'll have a phone call. If I am out of contract and looking at pitching, more widely, what I would do is the same thing, and then my agent would bundle that up and send it to a bunch of publishers and basically say, Julia has these books, or this book, these books, if I'm being ambitious and doing a bunch of pitches, that she wants to write. What do you think? And they'll go through that process as well. And in that case, we do a bit of contract negotiation, and that's a very big deal, different process. But basically, it all starts with that one idea that gets built out and gets built out. I'm what one of my friends likes to call an external processor. I like to talk my ideas out, so I find it really helpful to have a conversation with my agent, to have a conversation with the editor once the editor's accepted a pitch, just to get a sense of, am I thinking through all of these things that I need to be thinking about? Am I actually able to, articulate what it is that I want to write about? Because sometimes I can sit there and think, I know in my head what this is going to look like, and I know what I want this story to be. How do I now tell that to somebody else? And that's the trick. And it's just a skill that you develop. You have to go through it, and you have to, write a whole bunch of pitches and be told that they're not very good, and go back to the drawing board and kind of go through the process. So that's what it's like for me. Let's see. Ooh, somebody's got a Call the Midwife recommendation. I haven't seen that yet, and I feel like a bad historical fiction author because I haven't seen Call the Midwife, so I'm gonna need to fix that. Yeah, I'm really gonna need to fix that. Elizabeth, thank you so much for the kind words about the light over London. Hi, Angie. Let's see. Yes, I will be busy with 2 books in the next 2 years. You're very correct, Elizabeth. Very correct. Janet wants to know how you decide on what story to tell for each time period in The Last Garden in England. So I know, Janet, you actually got to read The Last Garden in England, because I think you were a Facebook Live winner. I think that's where I ended up doing a drawing, and your name came from. So congratulations. So The Last Garden in England, I decided on that time period because I knew I wanted... So The Last Garden in England takes place in 1907, 1944, and present day, which when I was writing it was 2019, 2020. So I knew I wanted some space between the different time periods, and I knew I started with World War II, and knew that that date was one that I wanted to play with. I worked backwards because I wanted enough time to have elapsed that it would be feasible for people within the story to have not met the people in the earlier time period. I didn't want them hanging out together. I wanted there to be a bit of separation, and to feel like there were some things that were questions or mysteries looking back. So that's the case for the present day, where essentially a garden conservationist, who goes through and redesigns and redevelops historical gardens, comes to this essentially abandoned garden that's just been completely neglected, and she is trying to put it back together to what the woman in 1907, the garden designer, originally planned it as, and so she sort of works through the process of what that looks like. It's a lot of hard work. And basically she's trying to restore life to the garden, and then also figure out why this one section of the garden has been locked. A gate has been locked, there's no key, and it's just been obviously neglected for years and years and years, and she feels very drawn to this part of the garden. It's the winter garden, right at the heart of the garden, the center of the garden. And so she wants to figure out what this is, and then there's some other things that come up. It's kind of interestingly labeled when she finds some plans, which is not a big spoiler. It's labeled with somebody's name, and she wants to figure out who that person is and what happened in that garden and what's the history of this. So I think for me, 1907 was a really nice fit because it was far enough away that it felt like a lot of time would have passed. Also, I had just gone to Hidcote Manor it's not in Warwickshire, Gloucestershire? Somebody will correct me if I've got that wrong. Very close to an area of the UK that I know pretty well, and it's this incredibly beautiful house with this incredibly beautiful garden, and the garden is set up in garden rooms. So each room, quote unquote, has a theme. And for me, I was really interested in kind of creating an overall garden theme that was broken out into these different rooms, and different things in the book happen in the different rooms. So part of why Hidcote is tied to this book is because I did a lot of research there, and it started to be developed in 1907, and so I was actually able to do a cheeky little cameo by the owner of Hidcote, who is its designer, or one of its designers. And I think it's it was a really, really fun way to incorporate a bit of that history, incorporate a bit of my research, a bit of an Easter egg for me. My dad took me to do some research, which was really fun. My dad's a really talented gardener himself, and so it was a bit of a nice nod to that. So something that you wouldn't know unless you watch this Facebook Live and I answer that question. But I thought that was kind of a nice way of stretching out this timeline over more than 100 years. So that's a bit of a long answer, but hopefully it gave you a bit of a sense of what you can expect in The Last Garden in England. So let's see. Brooks asking about picking character names. And whether I've changed a character name based on somebody with the same name leaving a bad taste in your mouth. Yes, I absolutely have. There's some names that I will not use, and no, I will not say them on here. But also, I've named some people some things just because people have annoyed me in the past. So if you annoy a writer, you run the risk of ending up in one of their books, which is very dangerous. I'm really bad at picking names. I feel like I get to the point where I need to name a character and I almost just freeze and kind of can't figure out what I should name this poor person. So for me, one of the things that I do is I turn to my shelf that's right here, or if I'm up in the countryside at my parents' place, I'll go to their many, many bookshelves and I'll pick an author's given name and I'll pick an author's first name and I'll put them together. So there are a lot of repeats sometimes. So for instance, I'm a big William Boyd fan. There have been several Boyds in my books. John Boyne is also right next to William Boyd on the shelf, so I believe I've had a Boyne in there as well. I'll twist people's names slightly in order to kind of get the same effect, but you know, with a slightly different name. It's just, I'm looking at some of the books right now. Yeah, I've used a lot of people's names over and over again. It is hard to come up with names, especially when in reality you might meet, especially here in the UK. I know so many Jameses, I know so many Ians, I know so many Davids, but if you put a whole bunch of Ians, Jameses, and Davids in a book, you're going to run into the issue of people having to figure out which one you're talking about. So you do need to be careful about sort of splitting those up and not reusing them too often. And I try to be very careful about anybody who's a main character, anybody who gets a lot of interaction within a book. I do try to make them distinct from book to book. So for instance, I've used Hazel, Marie, and Nora in The Whispers of War. I used Louise and Kara in The Light Over London. You're probably not going to see those names in any significant way unless I intentionally create an Easter egg and have one of those characters pop up in another book. So you're probably not going to see those names over and over again in my novels. So it's sort of, I picked it and now it's done. I can't use it again, at least not for a long time. So yeah, I do find that to be difficult, but that's my little hack, is I just steal other people's names. So let's see. Samantha is asking about what classic authors do I love. So, excellent question. There are a few different categories of classic authors. Buckle up for some book recommendations. So, I'm actually going to grab these because I think they're really pretty and you should see them. So, Jane Austen is a favorite. Yeah, let me do this one too. So, probably not a big surprise because I'm female and I read and wrote historical romance and I read and wrote a whole bunch of books, and I don't care if it's a cliche. I think she's fabulous. I love Jane Austen. So this is my copy of Pride and Prejudice. It's a really beautiful, like laser cut copy. These are what's the publisher's name? These are the Seasons editions by Thomas Nelson. So these just the absolutely gorgeous books, and they have illustrations and they have pull quotes and things like that. So this is probably like the 10th edition of Pride and Prejudice that I've owned, but I really love her books. I love Pride and Prejudice. This is kind of what I cut my teeth on when I first started reading her. This is my favorite though. So this is Persuasion, and that's supposed to be the seaside, where the incident jumping off the wall happens, and the ship and everything. So I absolutely love these books, which is why I bought these special editions of them. I just think she's one of the best, and she connected with me, and the fact that she writes about, deeply about character, and she writes about women's stories and, domestic matters, and gives them such significance and such resonance, I really think is pretty extraordinary. So I adore Jane Austen. This is also my honking great edition of Jane Eyre, which is a book I've read a bunch of times. I always manage to forget that it starts incredibly depressingly at the school and with her childhood, and just things are bad for a while. So I always have to remind myself to power through. But this is also a beautiful, beautiful edition. So you can see some of the stuff here. So yes, I do love two of these kind of classic heavy hitters. I'm also a really big fan of Anthony Trollope. We have a divide in my family between the people who love the Palliser novels and the people who love the Barchester novels. I've only read the Palliser novels. I haven't read, well, I've read three of the five, six? I've read a bunch of the Palliser novels, including the first one a couple of times. The Barchester series, which I know is supposed to be wonderful and people love, I have not read yet. I've only read the first one, which again is short and sweet, and then something happens at the beginning of the second one, and I had just finished the first one after reading it, and I thought, come on, I'm not going to continue on with this if that's what you're going to do to that character. So anybody who's read that series will know what I'm talking about. But I think I have to shout out some people who are a little bit more contemporary than that. I'm doing a bunch of reading, I call it kind of remedial reading, of authors in the 20th century also. So I absolutely love and have huge admiration for A.S. Byatt. I do a podcast called You're Never Gonna Read This with my sister, who is a fantasy and sci-fi book blogger and booktuber. Really, really, really incredibly deep knowledge about books in those areas, although she reads wider than that. And I recommended to her that she read the children's book by A.S. Byatt, which I think is phenomenal. Possession is a phenomenal book as well. So I really love those two, and I think she's just unbelievably, incredibly talented. Now that I'm, talking about books, of course, my mind is going completely blank. So I will think of more. Oh, North and South is one of my favorite books, so I've got to talk about that as well. So Elizabeth Gaskell, I think, is supremely talented, and if you haven't seen the BBC miniseries of North and South, it's a wonderfully faithful adaptation of the book. Surprisingly high body count for a period drama, which I think surprised me the first time I realized that. Really, really excellent, excellent book. So I would recommend that as well. I really love my Victorians, and I really find those books to be fun to read and reread sometimes. I also love The Beautiful and the Damned by Fitzgerald, and so F. Scott Fitzgerald. So that's another one that's more of sort of the New York Roaring Twenties cautionary tale. If you live your life this way, everything's going to go horribly wrong, which is interesting because it's sort of semi-autobiographical. But I really love that book as well. So yeah, I think all of those should give you some rain, some things to read. So I know I said I was going to go ahead and do a short version of this, but this is typically what happens when I start talking about books. I get really excited, and I can literally talk for an hour by myself in my flat. So I apologize for not doing this as quickly as I said I was going to, but I've been having such a fun time. I'm going to go ahead and be popping in over the next couple of days and answering comments as people come in and find this video, because this will be archived on my page. And I also want to make sure that I think I've figured out, I think we're going to experiment together, but next month, so the end of next month, there will be another one of these. We are going to hopefully be able to have a rolling event for the rest of 2020. So if you go ahead and I'll drop the link into the event page for this and on my Facebook page as well, but you should be able to join that, and then you should not have to join and rejoin a whole bunch of events. My hope is that if this works as it should, you'll be able to join once, and it will be a reoccurring event, so I'll be able to post what sort of the subject that we're going to be talking about that month is about. You'll be able to do sort of Q&As whenever, you'll be able to ask questions whenever it is you want. You can just drop in and ask a question, and then that event will continue to roll over, so you'll just get a notice every time a video comes up, and every time there's a live. I'll make sure that it's really clear what time of day things are, and so hopefully that will be helpful. So we're experimenting a little bit, making sure that everything works, but fingers crossed this will be useful for the rest of 2020, and then when we go into 2021 I can do a bit more of that, so it should be a lot of fun. Thank you again for joining me. I'm so excited that you guys have started joining me regularly, and to anybody who is new this time around, thank you again. If you are watching and you haven't left a comment yet, don't forget, this is up for grabs. I will be signing it, so I will go ahead and over the next couple days, once comments come in, I'll pull a random number, and whoever commented in that random number order will get a copy of the Whispers of War. It will be signed, and I'll ship it over to you. I do international shipping because I'm an international author, so that only seems fair. And also don't forget to sign up for my newsletter. That is on my website, Julia Kelly Writes. If you go up to the right-hand side, there's a button that says sign up for my newsletter, and that will go ahead and get you taken care of. So that will enter you onto the newsletter list that will allow you to get the email that will have this The Last Garden in England, which is coming out in January, the ability to go ahead and enter to win a copy of The Last Garden in England before anybody else does. So again, this is the advanced reader copy. It's not the fully printed hardcover, so this is kind of a special edition. It's kind of cool. You can go ahead and read this before anybody else does and hopefully really enjoy it. So thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day, especially on a Friday. I know how busy things can be, and hopefully we'll get to do this again. Keep an eye out for the event link. I'm going to go ahead and drop it in right now to the event page, and I'll see you guys again next month. Thank you so much. Bye.